hand sketch their property with some identifying mark, if they already have a house on it, if they have a shed on it, if they have a road on it, something that will identify that property. And then I have them put an address on that piece of paper. When that address is put on that piece of paper, it becomes that property. It is that property. I can dowse that map that they have drawn me, and I can find a good location for a well site. The same way when we're looking for lost items, we can do that with a map. Dowse the map, find the lost item, or where they can go and look for it. And, dowsing a map is necessary because I don't want to walk over 100 acres when I go out to dowse with my L rods and my Y rods. And if I have a little area that I have isolated that this is a good place, even though it's not to scale, I still may have to walk a good distance to find the exact spot that I have made a mark on that little diagram. But I have an area to go to rather than starting at one end of the property and walking all over 100 acres. And you don't want to walk over any kind of acreage here for very long because of all the ticks and chiggers that are back here.
It sounds to me, Gladys, like when you put the address to the sketch that you're asking somebody to do of the property, that the address becomes almost like a coordinate.
Absolutely.
So there is a coordinate system, at least with the map dowsing part. That sounds very interesting as well. But let's take the example of 100 acres. And I do my sketch, and I'm not very artistic, so I don't know what it would look like. But let's say I'm doing it on a little 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I don't know how you know how much is 1 acre versus 100 acres on the sheet of paper.
But you see, I don't, because I have something on that property, on that drawing, that gives me a core place to start from.
Okay.
Like, a little building, a house, shape. And I would start there and walk towards where I had made the mark on the map. If it was just the road or the driveway coming in, I would start there and go towards that area on the diagram to find the spot that I had found.
Interesting.
I don't know how far I would have to walk, but most people can look at that diagram that they have drawn and they can tell you approximately where that spot is.
Interesting. A well site is a place where you can drill down and there will be water, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So from a dowsing perspective, when you identify a well site, how do you bring in the precision sufficient enough for someone to drill?
Well, when I go out to look for a well site, and when I'm looking for one, even on that little piece of paper, I am asking for some specific things. I ask for a good potable source of water, a stream that will never go dry, runs all year long, and that will furnish a certain amount of water for a certain number of people. Normally the households around here, if we get 7 gallons per minute, that's a lot of water. In some areas in California, 100, 150 gallons per minute is not too much water for them. It's quite frequent, but it's not that way here. And so it's different in different parts of the country. But you want a good source of water. You want one that will never go dry, and you definitely want it to be not too deep. So you put all of that into your question when you're out there looking and when you're doing it on the paper.
So that's the criteria in which the question
gets in my mind when I have my rods in my hand and I am walking and looking for. That's always in my mind. That's the question that I put out, and I get the answer.
You shared that your husband, Harold, usually got what he asked for, which I thought was so interesting. Talk a little bit about that.
Most dowsers do, actually. We put all these little things out in, what we need for this family that we're dowsing for. And for some unknown reason, this is what we get. And Harold, many, many times, would say, do you think the water was there before I asked for it or because I asked for it? And that's a wonderful question.
That's a great question.
And we can't prove it at all, But I believe that it may have been there because we asked for it. I think it's there because we asked for it, and there is a need for it.
Very interesting. Talk a little bit about what you shared with me in our initial conversation about your journey into dowsing, about how you were a hostess and would receive people that were learning dowsing, and your journey to become who you are today in the dowsing realm.
It was, certainly not total skepticism, but because I did know about dowsing when Harold started into the dowsing group. But I had been married to Harold for almost 20 years at that point, and been in the military with him. And, I'd been the good hostess, when we'd have groups in and et cetera, and I'd always done that for him. But when he got into dowsing, I thought, my goodness, what does he think he's doing? And he did douse our well on our property, which is still a viable water source, and it serves water for 3 families. And I didn't know he could do it because we'd never talked about it. He never used it, that ability, when we were in the military.
What was his background in the military?
He was a military intelligence officer when he retired, and had been in military intelligence for over 10 years of his career.
Isn't this a huge leap from military intelligence to all of a sudden being interested in dowsing? What interested him in dowsing? And then I want to go back to
when he was a kid, dowsing was something that was necessary here in northwest Arkansas. They always had the dowser come out when he was a kid. And he used to follow him around and watch him. It was entertainment. When the dowser would come and douse the well, they would hand dig wells at that point. They didn't use drills. And so, the whole community would come and observe the dowser, and then the women would cook food, and the men would start digging the well with a pick and shovel. And Harold would participate even as a child. He was part of that. And he said that after the dowser would leave, and before the digging started, he would pick up that rod and he'd go around and he'd play with it. And he said the rod would always go down in that place. So he knew a lot about it, but he never had the need for it when he was in the military. But he believed that anything you hear, anything you observe that makes an impression on you and on your mind, you should file it away if you don't have a need for it at that time. Because someday you'll need to bring it forward and it'll come forward and you'll be able to use it. And certainly that's what happened for him. Now, I traveled along with him, and I went out and I would watch him do the well sites once he started the dowsing chapter here, and we started, going to conferences and learning all these things. But I went with him, and I kept records for him, and he was right on with his wells, almost 100%, not quite, but almost. But once you tell somebody that the well, the water's here, and you need to go so many feet down, and you'll hit the water, you have no control over what happens after that. When the well driller comes in and he sets up, and he starts down that drilling down, if he doesn't go straight down, there is a possibility that he could miss the stream. So you can't control that. Nor can you control the retrieval equipment that they're going to use to pump the water out. But you can tell them that you could get up to so many gallons per minute with the right equipment. You can retrieve this much water. Now, as far as the drilling